It was a bright, sunny day, and Thomas the Tank Engine was working on his branch line with his coaches, Annie and Clarabelle. Bertie the bus also takes passengers along the route of Thomas's branch line, and sometimes they often have a race, much to the dismay of Annie, Clarabelle, and their passengers. Slow down, Thomas! We've missed the station! But Thomas was going much too fast. He was determined to beat Bertie. Oh, I think we better slow down, Bertie. There's a big hill up ahead. Oh, bother that hill. I much prefer my shorter route. Thomas arrived at Hackenbeck Station. Some of the passengers got off and were very cross with Thomas. Then the driver collected a radio signal from Toby's driver and was told to move to the passing loop to make way for him, as he had an important delivery. Bertie saw this as he was charging up the hill. Now's my chance! And he raced past Thomas. Thanks for the lead, Thomas! What? No fair! Thomas shouted. As he pulled into the station, Bertie won. Hadn't beaten you here since that signal failure at Toy Wreck a few years ago. On his return journey to Natford, the Fat Controller was there waiting for him. Thomas could see that the Fat Controller was not happy. Thomas, I thought you learned your lesson by now of not going at dangerous speeds. One day you'll cause an accident, and you passed many stations with this race with Bertie today. Passengers come first on this railway, not racing. But it was not just Thomas who was being scolded at for the race. Bertie was told off too by his manager. What if there are roadworks, other vehicles, or even people on the streets while you were racing? Speed limits are there for a reason, you know. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. The next day, Thomas puffed along his branch line at normal speed. But when he saw Bertie honking his horn at him, he had the urge to race him. But his driver wouldn't let him. You remember what the Fat Controller said, have you? No high speed. Yes, driver, sighed Thomas. At the yards at the top station, Thomas was resting in a siding and spoke to Bertie. We've been racing for years and not once we've had any accidents. Well, apart from you having a near miss with Oliver when they were extending the Little Western line to Harwick. Don't remind me, groaned Bertie. Then Thomas had an idea and whispered it to Bertie, and the red bus chuckled. As Thomas's crew was simming him up, they realized that he hadn't raised his steam. Oh, come on, Thomas, we'll be behind schedule. Bertie's driver called Thomas's passengers to take the bus. But when he started him up, Bertie was stalling his engine. Even his driver was annoyed. Finally, Thomas was in full steam and gathered his two coaches. Looks as though we'll have to go over the speed limit to get ahead of time. His driver and fireman agreed, and after control gave them the okay, Thomas puffed away. And Bertie, now with him not stalling his engine, rolled away too. Got to go faster! Bertie was well ahead of Thomas. Looks like I'm going to win! Meanwhile, George the Steamroller was making his way to mend a road. As Bertie rolled down the hill and around the corner near Hackenbeck, his driver pushed the brake hard on. "George! Watch out!" But it was too late. Bertie's driver swerved violently to avoid mishap and then crashed into a local residence. His lights were damaged, his wheels were punctured, and worst of all, Bertie's front had been severely battered. "Watch it!" shouted George. Then Thomas raced past. He didn't know that his friend was in an accident. As his driver was about to put on the brakes, Thomas jolted along the points of the passing loop and knocked his crew off his footplate. Luckily, no one was hurt. By now, Thomas is a complete runaway, but he was too busy racing to know. As he was passing stations and signals, Thomas began to worry. "You can slow down now." But when he realized his crew were missing, all he could do was yell, "Help!" At Elsbridge, the signalman received a message from control that Thomas is a runaway. He then switched the points towards the small harbour. The workmen were told by the station master and told Stanley to use the trucks as a stopping barrier. As Thomas came into view, he closed his eyes tight, and then... Thomas, Annie, and Clarabelle were all derailed. Thankfully, though, he'd stopped. Later, Diesel arrived at the breakdown train, and in his cab was... the Fat Controller. "I will talk to you later," he said bluntly. When the clearing up work was completed, Diesel took Thomas, Annie, and Clarabelle to the works. At the workstation, the Fat Controller was talking severely to Thomas. "I know that you've done this deliberately, Thomas. You've done this whole delay thing so you and Bertie can have a race. It's a miracle that none of the passengers were heard from Bertie and that there were none on yours. But in order to think about what you have done, you will stay in your shed. Dennis will look after your branch line." "Yes, sir," sighed Thomas. At the garage, Bertie was talking to his manager about his incident and admitted that he deliberately stalled his engine so they can go fast. The manager wasn't impressed and told him that his repairs won't be done until he knows the rules well, so he can break them efficiently.